1968 was an election year, and the field went through a lot of changes, but it ultimately came down to three major candidates: Hubert Humphrey, Richard Nixon, and George Wallace. George Wallace, in particular, ran on a completely racist and segregationist platform for the presidency. He also directed intense vitriol and hate at the United States Supreme Court under then Chief Justice Earl Warren. The court had done lots of things by far. They stopped legal racial segregation in the United States and had established Miranda rights. This was so that criminal suspects were read their constitutional rights while being arrested. The court also rendered defendants the right to have a legal counsel, and that did not sit well with George Wallace, who was running as an independent.
The Supreme Court of our country has handcuffed the police. They have rendered decisions today that are absolutely ludicrous and asinine. Turn people loose every day who are self-proven and confessed murderers of 5 or more people. You read about it, you've seen it. And when they turn somebody loose who's a self-proven murderer of 5 or more people, some pseudo-intellectual tells us that really he's not to blame. Society's to blame because his papa didn't care him to see the Los Angeles Rams play when he was a little boy. And he's mad with folks.
One reason we've had a breakdown of law enforcement has been the Supreme Court of the United States has, by reflection upon the integrity and morality of the police of this country, made it impossible to convict a criminal, made it impossible to arrest one. And today, in the large cities of our nation, you cannot walk the streets of public parks without fear of physical molestation, because if you arrest someone today, they try the policeman on Monday instead of the criminal.
Although George Wallace didn't win the presidential election in 1968, he did pretty well for a third-party candidate. He won 5 states in the South, and that better-than-expected performance scared the daylights out of Republicans that he might take a lot of their voters and potentially cost them the election. Because of Wallace, Nixon got pushed to the political far right when it came to the election. He started talking about the, quote, forgotten Americans, the non-shouters, the non-demonstrators. They are not racist or sick. They are not guilty of crime that plagues the land, end quote. He called them the real voice of America and coined himself as the law and order candidate. And when it came to the Supreme Court, Nixon just went politically wild, promising to appoint justices that would overturn Miranda rights, public defenders, having legal counsels, and all the other stuff that the Warren Court had did. Get rid of all of it. He promised conservative justices only as part of his big plan to steal supporters from George Wallace by using that hardcore political talk. And Chief Justice Earl Warren, he saw what was going on. He saw what was happening. So he told President Lyndon B. Johnson that he would retire from the court ASAP when a successor could be named. He reportedly did not want to run the risk of Richard Nixon being elected president and choosing his replacement on the court. So this is in June of 1968, and now LBJ has this vacancy on the Supreme Court. So what does he do? He gets to work and he starts choosing nominees. And remember, this was just months before the presidential election. And this wasn't just any vacancy on the high court. This was the vacancy of the Chief Justice. So big deal, right? As Johnson's weighing his options here, he decides to elevate someone already on the court to the Chief Justice position, and it went haywire. Associate Justice Abe Fortas had been on the Supreme Court for a couple of years. He and LBJ were actually old friends. When President Johnson decided to offer him the role of Chief Justice, Republicans just balked. They went very, very slowly through his nomination hearings, and then a disturbing set of revelations emerged. Senators were soon made aware of that Judge Fortas was routinely at the White House for meetings, pressuring senators who opposed the Vietnam War, and also that he was embezzling money from a local university to teach a summer course. Very soon, then a lot of Democratic senators started withdrawing their support, and that was the end of it. Ultimately, he returned to being an associate judge on the High Court, and LBJ pulled back his nominee to replace Fortas if Fortas was ever elevated, but that never happened. So now Johnson is basically in panic mode, right? I mean, the election is coming up. He's the outgoing Democratic president working valiantly to nominate and get a Chief Justice confirmed before Nixon is potentially given that opportunity as the new Republican president. And sure enough, it failed. Richard Nixon won the 1968 presidential election, and Johnson did not get a new justice on the court in time. By the time Nixon became president, so much more of Abe Fortas's past had seen the light of day that he had to officially resign the court. He had to resign the Supreme Court completely as the Associate Justice. So now Nixon didn't just have an opportunity to add one Supreme Court justice, but two. He got to choose a new Chief Supreme Court Justice, and he also got to choose a new Associate Justice on the court. And because of that, the liberal Earl Warren Court shifted 360 degrees to the right that quickly. Nixon kept his campaign promise, appointed conservative justices, and George Wallace got his campaign promise in a way. In 2016, there was sort of a replay of this. Justice Antonin Scalia died, Associate Justice, and President Obama suddenly had a chance to appoint a new justice to the court. During that huge opportunity, pressure was mounted on Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg to retire. Despite that pressure, she did not leave the court, and for that vacant seat, President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, didn't even get a hearing by Republicans. Ultimately, outgoing Democratic President Barack Obama was unsuccessful in that effort to appoint a new justice, and Republican President Donald Trump got that opportunity. He nominated Neil Gorsuch, and he was later confirmed. Trump also got to confirm more judges, including the replacement of RBG, who announces that role is Amy Coney Barrett, Well, now there is a Democratic president again. And if you've been feeling a little bit of deja vu recently, it's because Justice Breyer is in the news for practically the same reason we've seen in the past. Adam Cohen has recently written a piece at The Atlantic about this with the subheadline, quote, "The longer Breyer remains, the more likely a Republican president choosing his successor becomes." The article continues, quote, "At 82, he is the oldest justice on the court and is under enormous pressure to retire in the next few weeks when the term ends. The logic of the liberals who are calling for him to step down is unassailable. If he leaves now, President Joe Biden can name a replacement, or Republican senators lack the vote to block the nomination. The filibuster, which is holding up other Democratic priorities, cannot be used to stop Supreme Court nominations. The longer Breyer remains, the more likely a Republican president choosing his successor becomes. Liberals pleaded with Ruth Bader Ginsburg to retire when President Obama was president, but she did not. And now Barrett sits in her seat and could cast the deciding vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. Breyer's decision about whether to retire this year could be the most consequential of his career. If he remains on the court and is succeeded by a Republican nominee, he could help ensure that the conservative majority stays in place for decades. That could make Americans more likely to lose abortion rights, employment rights, and even, it is no exaggeration to say, their democracy. If things go that way, Breyer may end up providing irrefutable proof, perhaps posthumously, of just how wrong he was in his insistence that justices are not political actors." End quote. Once again, reporting from Adam Cohen at The Atlantic about the intense pressure on Justice Stephen Breyer to retire, referring to this as an existential crisis, which could literally cost us our democracy, which is currently under attack right now, because of the unequal balance on the court specifically. And that is a good point to make. I mean, the politicization of courts and the Supreme Court, specifically in a democratic republic, is radically dangerous. Last week, the Supreme Court ruled on two major cases. One was on Obamacare, voting to uphold it, and another was on LGBTQ rights. I believe that vote was 7-2. Justice Breyer wrote one of the major opinions in one of those cases, and many essentially viewed that as a potential hint of retirement. But whether or not it was, the 2022 midterms are around the corner. Democrats have just finally started confirming federal judicial nominees. If Republicans take back the Senate or Congress completely in 2022, Mitch McConnell just said that he won't let Biden confirm any judges. So if Justice Stephen Breyer is thinking about retiring, now is the time to do so. This would help avoid another historic repeat of a 1968 or 2016 debacle. We'll be right back.